Hello and welcome to Episode 5, Hybrid Threats and its Impact on Russia-Ukraine War. To understand this complex landscape of threat research and analysis, we have today with us retired Colonel Ralph Thiele. He's also the CEO of StratByte Consulting. Hi, Ralph. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hi, Omkar. It's good to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Likewise, thank you very much for joining us, and it's really great to have a international security expert like you on the podcast. As we'll be taking a deep dive into this topic, so can you please provide us a brief outlook on your journey in the international security domain?
Well, it's a lengthy undertaking, I must say, but in a way, I've been 40 years in the German Armed Forces. 25 of these 40 years I've spent with top governmental or international officials. So I was speechwriting for our federal president. I was doing policy and plans for our Minister of Defense. I was working in the office of our Vice Chief of Defense Staff. Actually, with the German unification, I also got an assignment in the Supreme Allied Commander Europe's private office, which was interesting to see all these Eastern and Central European states coming apart the Soviet Union and becoming members of the European Union. Interesting environment. In fact, I've been commander of the Bundeswehr Transformation Center, supposed to make the Bundeswehr capable force for the 21st century. I've been at the NATO Defense College. So you see quite a number of assignments. Since 2013, I'm in independent consulting and running my own business. I've been advising governments. I've been advising major market leaders on network security and transformational issues. And I've been in particular focusing on hybrid warfare and disruptive technologies. And I guess this is what we are speaking about today.
That's an excellent journey, and it's a very wide experience for someone who has already seen the unification of the Germany and later on taken a step into the hybrid warfare research. It's something really great to have, and I think it's a very rare domain of research as well, which not many countries are yet focusing. And I'm glad that in Europe there are some movements happening in the hybrid threats research. So what, like, taking a deep dive into this topic, what are the hybrid threats and why are they important in modern warfare from your perspective?
And in particular, it's information and communication technology that enables a lot of things mankind has done for thousands of years, but was not able to do because they didn't have this modern information and communication technology. So hybrid warfare aims below this threshold of war and still tries to compel the own ideas, policy on opponents. This is what it does. And in an ideal case, you need not to have a war anymore because the opponent and his country and his society are giving up before you have to use weapons. Actually, this is something that Vladimir Putin also attempted in Ukraine. From there, it is very relevant. Actually, a couple of years ago, he has been more successful than this time, but still he attempted it with mighty forces. And what we see are a wild mix of cyber, of electronic warfare, of attempts to hijack critical infrastructure, and of disinformation. In principle, these are key ingredients of what is being done.
That's quite interesting. So you mentioned like there's quite a lot of impact on the civilian aspect as well. So can you extend a little bit on how this impact is?
Well, when we look at Ukraine in this case, actually the war started already weeks earlier. When you look at that, because or even months, you could say, first of all, Russian media were trying to leave their imprint on the minds of people that were watching these media, which actually are overwhelmingly used in all of Eastern Europe, so not just in Russia, but also in Ukraine and other countries as well. So you have a permanent penetration in principle of minds. You have then corruption. So I'm aware that quite a number of Russian diplomats were ready to take over the government in Ukraine after the intended coup. There was a lot of corruption, so that there was hope the government officials would take off once Putin's forces would enter the country, and then in principle they could take over. This obviously didn't work out well for a couple of reasons. Yet it also worked to a degree. I recall reports from high-ranking Ukrainian generals that were surprised how little defended, for example, the airports were near to Kiev when they passed by close to the attack. And so they did that last minute. So we will find out in some time what has happened there. We had an infiltration of the government agencies and their IT systems by Russian hackers. So they were willing to take them out of service. We had the same on the internet in Ukraine. So there were quite a number of activities going on. Unfortunately, the government and some of its agencies have been prepared in advance by the United States, Great Britain, and also Canada to react with a certain capability to these offenses. And so they didn't work out as it was intended to be. But it's a thrilling business where you really don't know which means the opponent has at hand and how they effectively will work, in particular when you're surprised by such attacks.
Yes, I think as you mentioned, Russia is definitely capable of hybrid threats and like conducting hybrid threats or striking it. And from that perspective, like, do you think Ukraine has been, if Ukraine has been receiving so much unanimous military support from the NATO member states, so is it capable enough to challenge the incoming hybrid threats from Russia now, as opposed to what it was capable before the war?
Yes, it's in a better position, I would say. We have a very special situation because, in a way, half of the world is supporting Ukraine, in particular, although with intelligence. Intelligence, in fact, is all kind of intelligence. It's open sources intelligence, it's electronic intelligence, it's communication intelligence, it's signal intelligence. So it's quite a number of impressive capabilities that come to the support of the Ukrainians. They have been trained to use that information they are getting. And actually, they have also shown a very impressive and interesting ability to apply it in a kind of experimental modus into their operations. So that this certainly has been a surprise for Russia, so that their hybrid attacks didn't have the impact they might have had. We've seen that, by the way, in particular in space, as space is a very important domain in that field, where Russian cyber attacks went towards Viasat and really hit it hard. Fortunately, again, the united joint efforts of industry, governmental entities, and international help could get them back again to operations. And then, of course, we have to mention Elon Musk's engagement there, that he was also pretty well intense target of Russian cyber attacks, who also managed with a dedicated working force to overcome all these things, sometimes even by just changing codes before they could really be attacked. So a very interesting learning experience. So yes, Ukraine will a little help from its Western friends, is able to withstand Russian hybrid threats.
That's really interesting. And as you mentioned about the space technology, I think it's a very important point. We have seen like Russia is already capable of having, a lot of things, especially in the space industry. They are highly capable. So as per your view, do you think Ukraine should have invested more in space technology before the conflict, and how it has impacted the overall position of Ukraine in tackling the hybrid threats?
Well, the Ukrainians came last minute in a way, but I think every one of us would have had difficulties in a valid preparation. If you really recall, when you look at space, for example, most of the traditional space support and communications and observation and intelligence was geostationary satellites that are very expensive and are high up in the sky. And when you now, as a country that is not so rich like Ukraine, want to order one or two or times, it's quite an effort to come to this point. I understand that Elon Musk, for example, had offered already 6 weeks before the war to provide his capabilities.
Yes.
And it happened then on day 2 of the war that in principle then it was accepted. And then you can see again unbelievable things happening. So not only him providing satellite capacity and ground stations, but also by crowdsourcing that individuals buy ground stations or allies provide them. Then the ability of Ukrainian engineers to make them the satellite capacity and the communication capacity through space available for both for operational purposes, in particular drone, the usage of drone to fight tanks, which has been tremendous actually, and a real killer for the first phase of the Russian aggression. So this is something that in a kind of experimental development overnight was developed, proved to be very effective. And so, in principle, Elon Musk will be in a position to say at a point that he significantly contributed to save the Ukraine. Amazing. No, who could have thought that? And how could you prepare for that? So, in principle, I think it's the willingness to give from those who provide it, as also the readiness to accept and then implement that into a capability that was really surprising. On the other hand, and we still struggle to understand that with all the high-end technology Russia owns, it's not too well in its performance. This is something that makes me think that they fell victim to their own hybrid approach. Means they never really expected that they need to fight. They just thought they could march into the country and take over. It's really amazing to see how many deficiencies in the professional performance the Russian command, but also the soldiers themselves displayed during this conflict so far, so that you have plenty of surprises, above average or brilliant performance of the on the Ukrainian side, and under average performance on the Russian side, agility, experimental innovation, getting it on board. So it's kind of interesting.
Yes, I think Russia didn't really calculate the impact of private commercial space technology companies, because in this war, I have always seen in the media people always mentioning, the West has always helped. But I would say it's the private commercial companies who have come forward in the developed countries, especially in the Europe and the United States, and contributed to the government's, extension of help towards the Ukraine. And I think that was a point where they miscalculated possibly the capabilities, because all these years the government has been a top player in the space industry, and now when the private players are coming up, as you mentioned about Elon Musk, so I think that has been a quite a miscalculation in their warfare
Yes,
assessment.
It has,
And
and it also affects us, by the way. So when you look at that, nobody in our, at least European governments, would have believed that is possible. Uh,
yes.
and with the short memory I've experienced in my 40 years in government, I'm afraid they will forget it after the war again.
Yeah, I think they should keep up this consistent investment and research towards these technologies. Just to take a step back from the Ukraine, because we have been observing similar kind of tensions happening between China and Taiwan as well. This is just a question out of a global context. Like, looking at the recent landscape of conflicts, do you think countries in general, countries from anywhere, like it might be Asian country or European nation, so financially as well as with time and efforts, are investing enough into study and to counter hybrid threats?
Uh, Unfortunately, I don't think so. You see, I'm in this hybrid business research development since more than a decade. And when you actually look at it, how government treated, they treat it as a kind of abnormity. So they do business as usual, and then they look into things that they don't really understand and take them as hybrid. Um, what is missing is an overall approach, because for my sensing, a hybrid is a new standard, and it applies to small players and to big players. And the military has an important role, but perhaps it's from a classical cake, a round cake we eat here in Germany with 16 pieces. The military has perhaps 2 or 3 pieces. The other pieces are non-military pieces, like intelligence, like economy, like media, society.
Yes.
So there are critical infrastructures, plenty of things, and all is based in principle on a healthy economy. It's also based on resilience to withstand shocks and stress, be it natural or hybrid by governmental players or even by commercial players. We have not discussed this aspect yet, because although they can come on board, just briefly to mention, when you look the two entities that collect most data in the world are Amazon and Alibaba. So it's not the US and China, it's actually 2 companies who collect particularly much data and are particularly professional in dealing with so many data, even in influencing individuals. So governments, companies, and individuals. So this is a very broad scope, and governments are only very slowly getting a grip on that. And this also applies to international organizations such as NATO or the European Union. They use the vocabulary since a couple of years. But when you look at the entities that are prepared to deliver instruments of power, if I may say so, and this is again not just the military one, but all the other features we have at hand, there's an enormous growth potential. So we need to understand the threat better. We need to come up with concepts, and we need to come up with capabilities resting on plans and concepts dealing with hybrid warfare. And this, as your question pointed at, of course, is valid all over the world. So when you look in particular at the Chinese neighborhood, they would be well advised to do likewise. China certainly is watching very closely what Russia is doing, but also what the West is doing in dealing with Russian threats, in particular also with Russian hybrid threats, and it will learn from that. And you can expect that they will apply their lessons learned in their neighborhood.
Yes, definitely. I think it is also a wake up call for the possibly all the defense agencies around the world who are not actually taking care of the hybrid threats or the hybrid modern warfare. And I think the current landscape of all the conflicts is a kind of a key takeaway as well for
Yes.
several lineup of nations. And I think we are proceeding ahead with the conclusion part, but just prior to that, after having provided such an extended outlook on hybrid threats, what are your thoughts on Europe's position? And do you think European security agencies are encouraging or investing into hybrid threats research enough to push the barriers?
We're starting. We are beginners. Let me put it this way. So the good news is in principle that we have understood there are hybrid threats. I guess the focus at the moment is in particular on disinformation, which is an important issue. So I don't want to play it too much down. Misleading individuals, companies, governments. If it works, is an important thing. But of course, you have to see it in conjunction with other activities. Let's take energy for the moment. When you, as example, when you can attack energy and public opinion, then you have a kind of reinforcing couple to destroy or at least to damage societies. This is something that to a degree we can see at the moment coming up in Europe, and I'm afraid there are no good plans yet how to deal with the issue. But you have on top a couple of other issues. You have the whole magnitude of cyber issues. I guess 70% of hybrid aggression and campaigns are linked to cyber issues, where Russia actually has managed to get well into our systems. One thing that has not been watched too long is how they got into the updates of our security systems and actually sneaked in the US and also in most of European security agencies, and we have no clue what that actually means with the upcoming quantum computing capabilities. We have to be aware that real-time hacking becomes a real possibility. So when you look at this, how well are we at this point? I would say the good news is that Europe has understood, the European Union has understood that this is an issue, that actually, which is also good news, they have lined up with NATO to jointly address these threats. At the moment, it's seen still as a kind of national obligation to deal with hybrid threats, and then they offer a degree of support then to nations in need of help. I think this is a little bit dated in this approach, because actually hybrid reach doesn't know country borders. It just knows domains through which it walks and where it damages the targets as wanted. So we need to be very agile, at least in the near real-time capacity. We need to be aware that these aggressions may move like a chameleon through space, air, sea, cyber domains, land domains, and we are tracking it all the time and trying to find where it is and what is the purpose of the aggressor to do with that. So there's so much challenge there that hopefully we take this as a kind of warning what's happening right now in Ukraine, that we have to become much better.
I think, I hope, I would say not think, but I would say I hope they keep on continuing this investment into this research, because I think it's very critical. And looking forward, the multi-domain operational capabilities are also developing. We have seen drones from Turkey, which also potentially some of them have satellite terminal, and I think the multi-domain operational capabilities are developing. So therefore, I think there is a more need towards investment into the hybrid threats.
Yes,
Definitely.
and this, if I may here again add something, when you look at the innovation areas, in principle, We know already with microelectronics that China may be a world champion in 2030. With artificial intelligence, the Americans are not sure whether the Chinese have departed already with their capabilities, so that they have difficulties to become even again. And when you look at quantum capabilities, the Chinese are off. Although in Europe, there are most of the scientists that know the domain and could do it. Our lack of capabilities right now to get a traction on the ground, to get projects forward, to get it to the market. So this is achievable, but it needs focus and ambition, I would say.
Yes, definitely. I think as we are reaching the end point of the conversation, so I would just like to know what is your message to the future generation stepping into this field of international security, defense, and strategic studies? Like after your decades of experience, what are the key takeaways would you like to give them?
Yeah, we need to be broad and deep at the same time, dealing with hybrid challenges and respective technologies. What it means is actually for future people that get in charge, we need both generalists that understands the system of systems actually that's behind it and can drive it and shape it. But we also need specialists that dive deep into technologies and their capabilities. So this is a time of focus, of concepts, of preparation. And then I guess we will have not too much time then to get also our instruments of power ready to apply, because what we see on the broad scale is in principle a big fight about well, who's stronger, democracy or the autocrats, so dictatorship, who is stronger with that, what kind of rules will apply international in the future. And that's all addressing the future of our nations and our way of life. So again, we need generalists and specialists, and they need to be shaped and born now.
Yes, definitely. Like, thank you very much again, Ralph, for this conversation. And I hope people take away a lot of key things out of this. Though it was a very brief, we can definitely have a second session, a follow-up session of this. So yeah, thank you very much for this conversation, and we wish you good luck with your research analysis on hybrid threats.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Omkar. It has been a pleasure. All the best to you.
Yes.